I am sitting in my apartment in Portland, 3 months after I disappeared. My phone keeps buzzing with messages from people who used to be family. They are telling me I am a coward, a monster, someone who abandoned his wife when she needed him most. But here is what they do not know. I did not abandon anyone. I walked away from a 7-year marriage the night I found out my wife, Sarah, was in love with someone else. She made her choice. I made mine. But according to her family, I am the villain in this story, just because I left without saying goodbye. Before we go any further, I need to know something. Where are you watching this from? Drop a comment and let me know your city or country. If you have ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, go ahead and hit that like button right now. And please subscribe, because what I am about to tell you gets much worse before it gets better. This is the story of how I disappeared from my own life, and how my wife's entire family turned me into the bad guy for refusing to be destroyed quietly. Let me take you back to the exact moment everything fell apart. Sarah and I met during our junior year at the University of Oregon. She was studying communications, and I was deep into computer science. We started dating after being paired together for a group project, and it felt like we just fit. After 5 years together, I proposed at Crater Lake during a weekend camping trip. She said yes before I even finished asking. We got married the following summer in a small ceremony in Eugene. My job as a software engineer at a tech company in Seattle was going well, and Sarah landed a position as a marketing manager at a growing startup. We bought a house in the suburbs, nothing fancy, but it was ours. 2 cars in the driveway, a golden retriever named Bailey, and plans to start a family within the next year. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Our weekday mornings followed the same routine. I would wake up first, start the coffee, and Sarah would come down in her robe around 7. We would sit at the kitchen table talking about meetings and deadlines, while Bailey waited patiently for his breakfast. On weekends, we hiked the trails near Snoqualmie Falls or wandered through the Pike Place Market picking up fresh vegetables and flowers. Sarah used to say I was the only person she could truly be herself around. I believed her completely. Looking back now, I can see the signs I ignored. About 3 months before everything exploded, Sarah started staying late at the office. She said her company was launching a major campaign and needed her to lead extra meetings. Her phone rang constantly, and she began stepping into the other room to answer. I told myself it was just work stress. She was ambitious, and I respected that. When she changed her phone password without mentioning it, I felt a small knot form in my stomach, but I pushed it away. We had been together for years. I trusted her. Then came the Friday night that cracked everything open. Sarah texted me around 5:30 saying she had a business dinner with clients and would be home late. I told her no problem and said I would order takeout, but my project finished early and I headed home around 6. As I walked past our home office, I noticed Sarah had left her laptop open on the desk. The screen lit up with a new message notification. The preview read, "Cannot wait to see you tonight. Wear that dress I like." The name at the top said Dylan. I stood there, staring at those words, my brain trying to make sense of them. Maybe Dylan was a female colleague. Maybe it was some kind of inside joke I did not understand. But the knot in my stomach pulled tighter. I did not touch the laptop. I just walked away and sat on the couch, staring at the wall, until Sarah came home at 11:15. She walked in smiling, kicked off her heels and asked how my night was. I said fine. She kissed my forehead and went upstairs to shower. I sat there in the dark listening to the water run and wondered if I was losing my mind. That night I barely slept. I lay next to her feeling like I was in bed with a stranger. The next week, I could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Sarah seemed more distant. When I reached for her hand, while we watched television, she pulled away, saying her fingers were cold. When I suggested we take a weekend trip to the coast, she said she was too busy with work. Every time her phone buzzed, she grabbed it immediately, angling the screen away from me. I hated myself for what I did next, but I needed to know. The following Friday, Sarah told me she had another late meeting. I called in sick to work and drove to her office building in downtown Seattle. I parked across the street where I could see the main entrance and waited. At 7 o'clock, Sarah walked out with a tall man in an expensive suit. He was probably in his late 30s with dark hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. I watched him place his hand on the small of her back as they walked to his car. She did not move away. She laughed at something he said, tilting her head back. In that way she used to laugh with me. They drove to an upscale Italian restaurant near the waterfront. I followed at a distance, parked down the block, and watched through the window as they sat across from each other at a candlelit table. He reached across and held her hand. Sarah smiled, her fingers intertwined with his. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and was squeezing my heart with both hands. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, just watching them talk and laugh like they were the only two people in the world. Then, I drove home, walked into our empty house, and sat in the dark living room waiting. Sarah came home just after 11. She looked surprised to see me still awake. I asked how the meeting went. She said it ran long, but they made good progress. I nodded and said I was going to bed. That night, I did not sleep at all. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how long this had been going on. On Monday morning, I hired a private investigator named Marcus. I gave him Sarah's information and asked him to follow her for 1 week. It felt like a betrayal, but I needed proof before I confronted her. I needed to know I was not crazy. Marcus called me Thursday afternoon and asked me to meet him at a coffee shop in Ballard. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photos, timestamps, and a written report. The man's name was Dylan Hartley, the marketing director at a partner firm Sarah's company worked with. They had been meeting at least 3 times a week for the past 2 months. There were pictures of them at restaurants, walking through a park, and entering a hotel in South Lake Union on a Tuesday afternoon. I sat there in that coffee shop looking at images of my wife with another man and felt my entire world collapse. My hands shook as I put the photos back in the envelope. Marcus asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine and paid him in cash. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried for the first time since my father died. That evening, Sarah came home around 8. She said she grabbed dinner with a coworker. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of me. I looked up at her and said, "Have fun with Dylan." Her face went completely white. She froze in the doorway, her purse still on her shoulder. "What are you talking about?" she asked, but her voice cracked. I opened the envelope and spread the photos across the table. Pictures of her and Dylan holding hands, kissing outside a hotel, sitting close together in his car. Sarah stared at them, her mouth opening and closing like she could not find words. Then, the tears started. She said it was a mistake that Dylan understood her in ways I did not. She said I worked too much, that I did not pay attention to her anymore. Then her voice changed. She looked at me and said, "I think I am in love with him." Those 6 words hit me harder than anything else. Not "I made a mistake." Not "it is over with him." She was in love with someone else. I sat there feeling my entire life crumbling and realized there was nothing left to save. I stood up without saying a word, walked to our bedroom and pulled a duffel bag from the closet. Sarah followed me crying, saying we could work through this, that she was confused and needed time to think. I packed clothes, my laptop, important documents, and my passport. She kept talking, her voice getting more desperate. "Please, Michael, we can fix this. Do not do this." I zipped the bag, looked at her one last time and said, "You already made your choice." Then I walked out of our house at 11:15 on a Thursday night, got in my car, and drove south on Interstate 5 without looking back. I drove for 3 hours straight and ended up in Portland. I had been there a few times for work conferences and always liked the city. It felt far enough away to breathe, but close enough to still work remotely. I checked into a cheap hotel that night and barely slept. The next morning, I found a furnished apartment available for immediate move-in, signed a 6-month lease, and transferred money from our joint account to cover it. Then, I went to a phone store and bought a new number. I kept my old phone active so I could see what was happening, but did not respond to anything. Within hours, the messages started flooding in. Sarah sent texts every few minutes begging me to come home, saying she ended things with Dylan, that she made a terrible mistake.